Hello, Andrew McNamee here. This is my CIS 9467 midterm project. I am interested in Broadway, so I wanted to do this project on some Broadway theater data if I could find any. After searching the internet, I came across a nice data set here from this website, the broadway.csv file here. It contains over 30,000 rows of weekly revenue data for every show on Broadway over a 20-plus year period. After downloading the data, this is what it looks like here. It comes as a CSV file, but in order to do anything useful to it, we really need to save it as an XLS file. Next, from here, we need to turn it into a table, and then we can do a lot of different things with it. First, we will add some rows to try to add to the data a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is add the season. That is, the Broadway season runs from June to May of the following year, so I'm just going to use an if statement here to determine whether it's the season. We'll look at the month. If it's less than June, then it's the year before. Otherwise, it's the year. And we're going to do the same thing for a few different things. Cumulative gross. We can add the length, the week of the run. After we add all of those things, which I'm not going to go through in every detail, we also need to realize that the data is incomplete for a few years. It starts here in 1990, but it really doesn't get complete until 1996. So we're going to delete the incomplete data and just deal with the years from 96 onwards. So after doing all of that, we end up with this workbook where I've already added the rows. So let's say we're a potential investor in a Broadway show. We want to use this data to determine whether we should invest. The first thing we want to do is look at a pivot table. So we are going to look at the trends of the last 20 years. We put the year in the rows. We're going to sum the gross, and we're going to look at different types to see if we can determine. And from here we can insert a pivot chart, and we will do a stacked area chart. And from here we can modify this chart and determine if we can see any trends. And that's what we have here. This shows that over the last 20 years the revenue has significantly increased, especially for musicals. So we might be best off investing in a musical if we're looking to invest in a new show. So now that we know we're going to invest in a musical, the question is, do we know when we should open our musical? So what we're going to do is see if we can find out any evidence of whether it's best to open a musical at a certain time of year. So we're going to do a new pivot table. This time we're going to use capacity, which is a percentage of seats filled for each theater, but we're going to use the average. So now that we have our data, we can format it up a little bit to make it look prettier. And in the end, we will also add some spark lines here. That will show us everything. After formatting a little bit, we get to this heat map. And this heat map shows that the 7th and 8th month, right here, July and August, are really the best months to open a show because that's when the capacity is highest, which is also shown here in the spark lines through all of these high points. So now that we know we are going to open a musical in July or August, we should find out if we can think of which theater to do it in. So what we're going to do is go to the original data with a new pivot table. And we're going to try to determine which theater sells out the best over these 20 years. We're going to add a slicer to filter this because we don't want shows that have been in the same theater. We don't want to look at theaters that have had the same show in it forever. So we're not going to look at shows that have a length of a run that's over, say, 300 weeks, because that's 5 years. They're 6 years. They're not leaving that theater. So when we add a slicer, we see that it's got every possible length of run, and we don't want that. So how do we group it together? That's how we do it. We have to go to the length of run. We have to put that in the pivot table first, and then we're going to group it from this point. And we're not interested in shows under 300 weeks, so we're going to start at 300. We're going to go to, let's say, actually 300 will be the end where we don't care. We'll start at 11. We'll group by 50. So now we have it grouped by length of run, but we don't really need it grouped by length of run. So we just add our slicer. And we can look at shows that are over 10 weeks, but less than 300 weeks. We can sort and figure out which theater is best, which we've done over here, and we've added graphics to it, and we've added two slicers, length of run and capacity. So now we can look the New Amsterdam Theater for shows that ran between 10 and 300 weeks or so, sells out at 98.8%, which is great. So if we can get into one of these theaters here, that would be great. These sell out their seats. What if we want to see the theaters that have trouble selling their seats? Well, we look at the bottom theaters. So these are the theaters we would prefer not to have our show in. So now we know we want to be in the New Amsterdam Theater. So we're going to open a musical in July in the New Amsterdam Theater. What is the top end potential here? So we've created a chart here that shows the top 10 shows by each year. You can click on any given year and it shows you the revenue for the shows. And so Wicked's been a good show in the 2000s here. Every year it's in the top 10. And man, if you get a good show, you're really going to be making it. You're pushing $100 million here. Oh, there it is. Lion King hits $100 million. Another way to visualize this is through a scatter plot animation. So this shows the cumulative gross for each show, and we've filtered it a bit here. We've filtered it so every show that's had a cumulative gross over 200 million, and we can look at it over time. When the show drops out, that's when they've closed based on this date right here. So we see the Lion King making its run here. So for the 20 years, that's made the most money. We can click on any individual show and see the path of how they've made it to where they are. This is their cumulative gross. This is how long the show's run. So this one's run for over 1,000 weeks to get to $760 million in gross. We can compare that to Wicked, which has run 600 plus weeks to get to almost $1 billion in gross. The last thing we can do is just look at a regression. So using a pivot table, I was able to look at every show that ran, and then I averaged their length of run, their capacity, percentage, and their gross potential, which is the amount of revenue they did make versus how much they could have made for that week. And we sliced it out to get rid of outliers. So using this data, I ran a regression through the data analysis tool pack up here that will allow you to choose different types of regression. We ran regression here, linear regression, and this is the output over here. So I wanted to know if average capacity or if gross potential had more influence on how long a show ran. And this right here shows you that gross potential and average capacity, the coefficients here with the standard errors, and the p-value is really what we care about. So the p-value of gross potential is much more significant than it is of capacity. So if we can maximize our gross potential, we have the chance of running for a long time. So I hope this video has shown you all of the amazing and helpful things that Excel can do to help visualize and analyze data. by using this Broadway data.